Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, and I've got another countdown for you, or more of a series ranking, because fairly recently, a friend of mine on here, Death Metal Elitist, go check out his channel, he did a ranking of the Saw series. So I figured I haven't talked about Saw at all on this channel yet, so I figured this would be the best way to start doing that. I'm not going to start reviewing them just yet. I'm going to wait for the right time for that. But I do have a ranking. I'm going to rank them down 8 down. And the thing about Saw is, for the longest time, it was my favorite horror series. It has since been beaten by the Evil Dead series. I'd probably still keep this second. I was in 7th grade in 2004 when the first one came out, and I remember we rented it, and I thought it was it's still one of the best horror movies of the 2000s, the first decade. Definitely one of the best horror films of that decade. My mom is a huge fan of it. My dad likes it. My brother will watch it. And it literally became a yearly tradition, because this is one of the only, probably the only horror franchise, especially with this many sequels, where they came out every year. Except for Jigsaw, which I think it was 7 years in between. So we went opening weekend every year to see 2 through Jigsaw. And through that time, junior high and high school, I was obsessed with Saw. Shining was still my favorite film, but I was obsessed with Saw. I would not read anything about the next Saw movie except for the release date. I didn't want to know anything. The last week before opening weekend was always killer for me, because I could not wait to see it. Loved these movies so much. Especially being a gore hound my whole life. I would say, as far as mainstream films, these are the goriest, especially in a realistic sense, set of films. Hostel can go fuck itself. Hostel was very disappointing, very overrated. Don't care for the sequels. I think people just like them because they do have their brutal moments. I'm sorry, but when there's no torture scenes, there's nothing to Hostel. And even the torture scenes are very disappointing. Saw, I know people will say there's nothing but torture. I'm like, well, there is a story that goes through all of them, and each one does explain more story from the previous film. Which I know people will say about Paranormal Activity. To me, Paranormal Activity is just nothing but cupboards opening, blankets getting pulled off people, and a kitchen getting fucked up. So there. Agree to disagree. Saw fans, Paranormal Activity fans, they think the same thing of the opposite. So there. Over the years, as I've grown to appreciate film more, I can't say the writing for these films. The twists became more convenient. The writing for everything became a little more convenient. You look at how perfect everything works. It's like, okay, you kind of start to lose the reality of, okay, Jigsaw's really that smart. He was able to plan that far after his death. Spoiler alert. And that's the thing. I'm going to try my best not to spoil these, even though a big part of what makes these films are the twists. They're like good, gory Shyamalan films. The twist is what makes them what they are. But it just felt like the story, the writing, and the twist became more and more convenient as it went on. But okay, almost 5 minutes in. Let's just get to the countdown. I still love these movies, some more than others. I really think there's only 2 that I would say aren't good movies. But I still love the series as a whole. So number 8 is Jigsaw, which I don't own. I haven't seen it since theaters. it just, it felt, I know they had been working on it for a while, but it really felt like, hey, it doesn't, writing doesn't matter as long as we make it a Saw movie, as long as we have the music, as long as we have a twist, as long as we have traps, people will like it. It's a Saw film. I didn't really care for the twist. It just kind of, it felt really cheap. It felt more of just like, oh, okay, is it like like, it's the very definition of a twist. It's like, oh, it's literally the opposite of what we thought. But it didn't feel very creative. It felt more forced than anything. The traps either felt, I mean, I liked the silo trap because it went back to being simple. I did not like the laser trap. I thought the laser trap was, okay, now we're getting a little too wait, are these believable movies? No, they're not. But there is a limit. I'll get more into that. But so Jigsaw, I just thought wasn't that great of a movie. It's one of the ones I could say I'm not really a fan of. Number 7, we have Saw: The Final Chapter, or Saw 7. Jigsaw, this and the original film, really feels like it's its own movie. The quality, the way it's filmed, the writing, the look of the effects, the 3D really throws it off. It feels more like a Saw knockoff than it does a Saw sequel. I mean, Saw 2 through 6 does feel like a continuous series. Those all feel like very separate films. Oh, also, I disagreed with something that Jigsaw did in Jigsaw, so there's that. I can say I liked the traps. Well, I saw this twice in theaters. I went with my brother, then I went with my parents. I can say when I saw this, I was going through a high school breakup, and this has some of the most, this is probably the most, I don't want to say misogynistic, but all the brutal deaths are women, and there's always something to yell, like, why did you just shut the fuck up? So I found it more amusing. You know, you have the slutty girl getting killed in the beginning with the 2 guys she's dating at the same time. I liked the traps in this one. I liked the traps more than the movie itself. You know, I liked, and also I waited technically 5 years to find out what happened to Gordon. And this one finally addresses it. I could say I liked the very ending, like the final scene of the movie. I'm glad it ended that way. And just as a movie, I thought it was kind of poor. It's not really clear if it's because it centers around a this isn't a spoiler, this is known throughout the film, a fraudulent survivor who writes his story and becomes rich and famous. And then in these Saw survivor groups, there's people sharing their experiences that we hadn't seen, so it's like, okay, are these other liars? Has the work of Saw carried over and spread? Is it stuff Hoffman has been doing? Like the girl with the ex-boyfriend and the lawnmowers. But then we see survivors that we've actually seen. I didn't think this was as good. It does feel like a 7th movie in a series, but like made for Sci-Fi Channel. Anyway, number 6 we have Saw 5. Which, it felt a lot like Saw 2, where we start with a group of people in one area, and as it goes on, there's fewer. The twist was okay, but, you know, again, it was just one of those, as the sequels went on, it just felt like a fun house where every meticulous detail works perfectly, like a Rube Goldberg thing gone perfectly right. I liked the opening, a pendulum trap. The whole "you won't believe how it ends," I thought it was kind of a letdown. It's like, I kind of can believe that. It's not like you blew my mind. And I don't know if it's because they thought, oh, this is one of the biggest and best traps that we have, or that we've done. No, if you're going to tell me you better believe how it ends, you better blow my mind, like, with the story. I did like this trap in the beginning. I'm more of the mind with Saw traps like this. Very simple traps like that. Saw 5, yeah, I wasn't a big fan of. Number 8, 6. Number 5, we have Saw 6. This is another one where it felt like a fun house. A guy going through a series of things where everything works perfectly. Some of the rooms I liked more than others. I liked the opening trap where you have a heavy guy and a skinny woman and they have to cut a certain amount of flesh off, put it on a scale, and whoever gives the most wins. I liked that. I did like the very ending. The twist I thought was pulled off. It didn't seem as convenient as some of these later sequels. I thought the twist in this played out well. I did like the final trap. It was one of the more gruesome ones. But once you get into like much bigger, multi-layered traps, it kind of takes me out of it a little bit. Especially since some of these, like, I'm guessing Jigsaw did these. Hoffman is just getting the people for them. But there's even parts in this where it's like, okay, Hoffman built that. I also like how all the ones I have the original slipcover, except for this. This one didn't deserve it. 6 has its moments. I like the traps and the end twist more than I do, because by the time we get here, the flashbacks to previous films that it reveals more of, I just felt it was either unneeded or they're just trying to expand it beyond the way they need to. But yeah, Saw 6. Number 4, we have Saw 4. I liked the opening. Now, this isn't really a spoiler either. Look at where his head is. I like the opening of the autopsy. I like it for its medical accuracy. I was surprised they were able to get away with it theatrically, not just the director's cut. I also regret buying the first 4 in full screens when I was obsessed with full screen like a moron. I didn't care much for the twist. The twist at the end, it really felt... This is one of those things where it's like, okay, how can we just trick the audience? It didn't feel like a more well-written, it's been in front of you the whole time kind of like... I actually like the twist of Saw 6 more than I do Saw 4. But I like this one because it's a bunch of smaller traps in different places instead of just this big abandoned building. You know, I like how SWAT Commander Rig, he has to go on like this scavenger hunt, and there's all these smaller traps. That's one thing that I like more about Saw 4 than the later sequels. Well, okay, there's actually 2 twists. The twist for the setting, like when this takes place, I liked that. But the twist about the characters, that's the one I liked, the overall twist of Saw 6 more than in this one. But I do like the traps in this one. They're bigger than the earlier films, but they're still small enough to where they're not overly convoluted. Except for the final trap. That one was a little... Okay. Starting to lose me. Like, I really like the mausoleum trap. That brought me back to older Saw films. Guy with his mouth sewn shut, guy with his eyes sewn shut. They have to work together, but there's no way to as they're getting pulled closer together, or they'll be strangled. I like those Saw traps, the more simple ones. Number 3, we have Saw 2. Now, I know this is the favorite of a lot of people, For me, I do like it. This is the first movie where we get Jigsaw and we get to learn him as a character. But this is also sort of the first time where we have this bigger place. I mean, everyone has their own assigned traps. And the traps are, again, much smaller. Like, everyone remembers the needle pit. Dive in the pit of dirty needles, find a key. I like that stuff. Donnie Wahlberg as Detective Matthews, I liked. We're introduced to Carrie and not Hoffman yet. We're introduced to Rig. I think this is one of the more overrated ones of the series. I mean, yeah, the traps are smaller. I do like the twist at the end. But I think everyone just remembers it as the one with the house. In fact, my favorite trap is the opening one. That to me is as true to Saw as you could get. Guy with the nail mask that will shut unless he digs a key out of his eye. It's still in my top 3, but there's 2 other ones I like more. Number 2, this might surprise people, Saw 3. This is actually my favorite sequel. Like, yeah, it is a guy going from room to room, but the traps are my favorite of their kind. They're still, it's that perfect mix of like a big convoluted trap, but small enough to where it doesn't need the whole room to do shit. You know, I like how it continues from this one, you know, with Matthews and, you know, what happened to him at the end of this one. I love the pig slop trap. You know, because for me, I get claustrophobic when there's drowning involved, so that's one of my favorite traps, plus it's disgusting. My favorite trap is the rack. You know, to me, I think that's the perfect Saw trap. The revelation at the end, the twist for the characters and the twist of the game is one of my. I like this. I like this sequel more than all the other ones. I do like the backstory for Amanda. Shows her start. So I liked that. When I first started watching, like, another reason why I put these in my top 3 is because it goes back to the bathroom. And I liked it when they do that. Yeah, 7 did that for the last scene, and that is my favorite scene of the movie. And of course, number 1 is Saw, which I think if I had a top 20, this would be in there as favorite movies of all time. For a while, this was my favorite movie. You know, it was The Shining, then it was this for a while, then I went back to The Shining. This, to me, is the perfect torture porn film. You know, I love the twists and turns. Yeah, it's not as gory, but I love the traps. They're believable traps. You know, a guy in this one room, he keeps committing suicide, supposedly for attention. If he wants to die, he has to stay there. If he wants to live, he's got to crawl through this web of razor wire and cut himself again. Guy keeps telling people that he's always sick, to get out of work or get out of doing stuff, or for sympathy. So he's injected with a poison, has to find a combination on the wall, but he's smeared with a flammable substance, and he's only given a candle. These are believable traps. And also, Cary Elwes as Dr. Gordon and Lee Winnell as Adam, who would go on to direct The Invisible Man, which is great. And he co-wrote this with James Wan, one of my favorite horror directors of this century. You know, they would go on to work on Insidious and I think The Conjuring together. You know, shackled by the ankles in this bathroom across from each other, they have to cut their feet off to get out or figure something else out. This has my favorite twist in the whole series, and it's one of my favorite twists ever done in a film. I mean, this is like The Sixth Sense, where it's like, it's not just like a little twist where it's like, oh, I didn't see that coming. It's like, it changes the course of the film. Like Scorsese said, a movie with a good twist that works means you can watch it twice in a row and get two different movies. Like this, Sixth Sense, Shutter Island. Of all the movie-changing twists, this one is my favorite. I thought it was well done. The twists and the turns were well done. It's also like a detective procedural trying to catch this serial killer. It does feel like its own self-contained film, and then these ones feel more like a connected series built off of this one. I've always loved this movie. I always will. Yeah, it started the torture porn genre, but to me, it's a perfect example of psychological horror. It plays with your mind, gets you thinking different directions. Sure, it's not as gory, but it's bloody enough. And the gore, I give credit to the first 6 because it looks realistic. They go all out with it, even if I don't quite believe in all the traps. Also, after a while, it's like, I could buy Jigsaw doing this shit, not so much his apprentices, because he's an engineer, they're not. What do they know about building this shit? Hell, there's even one that Amanda builds. It's like, how the fuck does she know how to build that? It's nitpicky, but whatever. So yeah, from 8 down to 1, we have Jigsaw. 7, 5, 6, didn't mean to do that. 4, 2, 3, and my favorite of the series, the original. That is my ranking for the Saw films. Again, go over to Death Metal Elitist, check out his channel, check out his ranking, and thank you for watching.